Hello everybody, John back here again with another video, and today I bring you another costume slash superhero breakdown review, if you will. Basically, Supergirl is obviously one of the more anticipated comic book TV shows that come out later this year, and of course, they're getting ready to start production on the pilot, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they already started shooting the pilot. I could be wrong about that, but basically, Supergirl is now in production, so obviously, it's time to get some promotional images, and Supergirl is being played by Melissa Benoist, and we just got several images of Melissa Benoist in the Supergirl costume. So now I'm here just to give you my brief, or hopefully brief, breakdown and review of the costume at hand. Now, when you look at it from a distance, it's very, very simplistic, and you can obviously see it's definitely heavily influenced from prior Supergirls from the past. So it's obviously very vintage. Now, the costume designer who created the Flash and Arrow suits basically designed and created this costume. So if you love them, then you're obviously going to love this one. But you can obviously see the parallels from, you know, where he was coming from with this specific costume. And if I'm not mistaken, the designer who created this, who did create the costume, basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, and exaggerating it a little bit possibly, but basically the designer was getting at is that the fact that when designing this specific costume for this show, the designer was obviously trying to go for a much more vintage and retro look for like the feel and design of the Supergirl of the comic book lore, and of course what has been presented in the past, and of course giving it modern flavor. And when you look at it from afar, you can obviously see that it's heavily influenced from not only the comic book Supergirl that we've seen already, but of course Supergirl costumes that we've seen in the past. And also, I kind of get the, like, a Wonder Woman kind of feel to it a little bit as well, but I'll get into that in a second. But when you get into further detail, when you look at it up close and personal, when you zoom in into it, you can also see that it's very heavily influenced from Henry Cavill's Batman v Superman / Man of Steel costume, which I personally love. I mean, a lot of people may have their personal issues with the DC Cinematic Universe and Man of Steel itself, but if there's one thing I really loved was the redesign of the costume. I love the design. Granted, they could have upped up the color a little bit, but what are you going to do? Nonetheless, no one could deny it's a badass costume. But when you go into this costume, you can definitely see the parallels, and a lot of it has to do with not only the color, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people mentioned already, but also the design. I mean, like, when you zoom in into the torso and to the overall skirt and the shirt itself, it definitely has the same texture that Henry Cavill's costume has. And granted, I'm going to definitely be using him as a template for this, because obviously he's the current Superman, so that should be the obvious template for other characters in his universe that share his, you know, his symbol. So obviously that's where I'm coming from with this. But overall, I love that touch. Granted, it could be a little bit more up with the blue and maybe the red, but then again, we're just gonna have to see it in action. Moving off of that, the cape itself looks pretty cool. It looks definitely very cloth-like, like the Man of Steel cape, but granted, it doesn't really matter. As long as they do the same thing that they did in Man of Steel, which was, personally, the most badass thing, which is to basically CG the cape and just make it look like it's a good, fucking awesome, epic, flowing cape the way it looks in the comics. If they can accomplish that with this pilot, then I'm okay. The cape is whatever. It's just a promotional image, so it's not like it fucking has to. It's basically something that she could wear when she's standing around, you know, saying her goodbyes to whoever she's saving or whatever. Moving off of that, going into the symbol itself, the House of L, the symbol of hope, if you will. Very, very simplistic. It kind of, when I saw this costume, that was the number one thing I looked at, and it's the number one thing I don't like with this costume. Granted, Supergirl's costume, with its variations, is a secondhand Superman costume, so it's not like it has to look overly detailed and awesome and epic like Henry Cavill's costume. But granted, they could have at least amped up the design of the S. It could have just looked way more epic than it does now. Granted, it's Supergirl, and on top of that, it's, of course, not the original S that Superman wears, and on top of that, more than likely, she'll probably get more costumes as time goes by, I'm pretty sure. We don't know. We haven't seen the show yet, so we don't know at this exact moment. But looking at it right now, it kind of looks like, it just looks very half-assed, if you will. It kind of looks like if they just grabbed a Superman S from like some t-shirt, cut it out, took out the yellow inside, and just attached it to this costume. That's what it kind of looks like. It doesn't really scream, yeah, this is the Superman family, if you will. This is the House of L. This is the symbol of hope. It just looks like some half-ass S that they attached to it. Beyond that, there's not really anything else I can say about that. When you go into the shirt itself, when you go into more detail, besides the whole Man of Steel parallels, it also has lining all through the costume, which I don't know if they did that on purpose to make it have like that Flash New 52 kind of feel, because a lot of the New 52 characters have a lot of lining in their suits. Like, it goes around the arms, it goes around the torso, around the chest. So, I don't know if that was the overall inspiration that they were going for, but at distance, it's hardly noticeable. When you go into detail, it's very noticeable, and I'm not really loving it. It's just one of those things that, in theory, it looks cool, but when it comes to this specific character, it's not really necessary. I mean, like, if you were doing Green Lantern, or the Flash, or hell, even Superman, and maybe Batman, maybe, but Supergirl doesn't really need it, and I don't know, it just doesn't really look right. And plus, I'm not really big on the red stitching on the blue. It looks kind of, once again, it kind of gives it that half-ass kind of look. It just, you had me with the Man of Steel texture, and then you kind of killed it with the really weird red stitching lining all over the costume. That's what it kind of, the vibe it's kind of given me. Besides that, that's really all I can really say about that. On the belt, definitely has a very simplistic design. On top of that, it kind of has like a weird Wonder Woman kind of vibe to it, which is not really that terrible. But beyond that, it's just, it's very simplistic. There's not really anything else you can say beyond that. To the skirt itself, definitely the same texture as the rest of the blue shirt. And that's pretty much all you can say. Beyond that, of course, when you go into further detail, she's obviously wearing tights, so this specific Supergirl is not going to be as revealing as she is in the comic books, which I knew that was the kind of, direction that they were going to go, so it's not really that big of a deal. But beyond that, you of course go on to the end of the costume, which is the boots, and the boots definitely look very, very leathery, and I can't really say that I'm really loving it. I just can't really get into it. I mean, it's definitely leather, and it's definitely not the same texture as the rest of the costume. Like, the blue and the red, the blue shirt and the red skirt are obviously the same texture, and then when you move on from there, the boots are just leather. So, I don't know if that was because of it was like just a last minute kind of addition, or it was just something that they just didn't want to full-on copycat Man of Steel. But, yeah, I don't know why they couldn't just go that route. But beyond that, they're just boots. They're just red boots. They're not really any more, there's not really any further detail. They're very simplistic, just like the rest of the costume. And there's not really much to say. You can't really see the rest of it because, obviously, the picture, the promotional image itself is very, very dark in this part of the costume. But nonetheless, that's pretty much the Supergirl costume. Granted, it's Supergirl. They were obviously not going to go with the very revealing design that we've seen throughout the comic book history. But it was definitely something that I was hoping that they could have gone. Granted, it's the first real leading superheroine on TV currently, as of now. So, they definitely didn't want to come up with a very, very slinky, kind of revealing, fishnet kind of, cleavage, kind of design with this specific character, you know, so they wanted to give it a more respectable and simplistic kind of look, which, if that was the goal, then they accomplished it. But as a fan, it's definitely 50-50. I like it, but then there's so many things that they could have done better. But at the end of the day, we have to see it in action. So, if I had to rate it, I give it a good 5 out of 10. It's okay. It's definitely my least favorite of all the other costumes that we've seen. But then again, take that in perspective. All of the superhero costumes that we've seen, really, when we first see them without, you know, having the context of, you know, seeing in context with the rest of the show, it definitely looks shit. I mean, like, when we first saw the Barry Allen Flash suit, it was the worst thing ever. Everybody was like, oh, it looks stupid, it's too leathery, it looks like fucking Daredevil, this ain't the Flash. And then when you see the Flash TV show, it's like, who gives a shit? It's the fucking Flash. This is the greatest shit ever. You know, and that's kind of like how I've gone through it with all of the rest of the costumes and the rest of the characters with all the TV shows. I mean, like, when I first saw the Arrow suit, I thought that was the dumbest thing ever, and then when you see the show, it's like, okay, awesome. You know, move on from there, you go to Black Canary, to the Flash, all these various other characters. And now with, you know, the Atom, I was hoping that they were going to go a little bit more out of their budget and more, you know, extravagant, if you will. But, very, very simplistic. And really, I just have to see it in action on TV to really get the full extent of what Melissa Benoist as an actress can really do with the character Supergirl / Kara Sorrell, but also what the design of the costume kind of fits with the overall vibe and atmosphere of the show. And of course, I really hope they go the Man of Steel CG cape route, which I kind of get the feeling they won't. But if they do, that's, you know, kudos to you guys. But nonetheless, what do you personally think about the Supergirl costume? Let me know in the comment section below. I like it, but I'm not in love with it. And at the end of the day, as much as I kind of bashed it in this video, overall you have to keep in mind that, you know, the costumes that we've seen in the past aren't really that much better, and you really have to see the show itself to really get the full extent of what this character is really going to be all about. But nonetheless, this is Melissa Benoist's Supergirl costume. I personally think they could have gone a little bit more extravagant, but it's definitely very simplistic. It definitely has the vintage feel. It definitely looks like Supergirl. And also you can see the Man of Steel kind of references in the design and texture of the costume. But at the end of the day, it's not really a mind blower. It's not really insanely awesome and epic looking. It doesn't really scream, you know, this is the house of, you know, this is the symbol of hope kind of feel that, you know, a Supergirl character and of course costume and should look. You know, the S, I'm just saying they could have made it look a little bit more epic, if you will, just like the Man of Steel S, you know. But that's, you know, just paralleling. It just should have been the template. I mean, I'm just saying, once again, not trying to bash it, but when you go online and you see like all the Man of Steel Supergirl template / photoshopped images that they've done, I like those more than this one, which is saying a whole lot. When I know it's Photoshopped, when I know it's fake, when I know it's bullshit, that says a lot. But nonetheless, I do think it's okay. I give it a good 5 out of 10. It's okay, it's just not mind-blowing and awesome. It's definitely, out of all the costumes, definitely my least favorite. It's definitely under all of them. And, you know, and of course on top has to be, you know, the Atom and the Flash for me personally. But let me know in the comment section below. How do you feel about Melissa Benoist as Supergirl? What are your expectations for the TV show? Are you going to check out the pilot? And of course, at the end of the day, give me your personal thoughts on the costume at hand. Let me know what you personally think about it. And this has been my personal thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you personally think. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. I hope everyone checks out Supergirl, and this has been John 12.